Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC Rich, and I'm joined by my guest, Becky Anderson of Black Armada Games. Hey Becky, welcome to the show.
Hi Rich, thanks so much for having me on.
So excited. This is the first time we've gotten to talk. I was there as a backup guy when you were on a Dr. Tom the Frog show episode. So it's nice to just me and you talk here. I have to start off with the traditional question. How long have you been playing PbtA games, and what was your gateway?
7 years. I think it's about 7 years. I had to look up when Apocalypse World came out because that was my gateway game.
An OG. Awesome. I'm curious, when you first played, did you play or did you MC?
Oh no, I definitely played. I had a couple of good friends who kept saying, Becky, there's this game, Apocalypse World. We think you'll really love it. And I was like, yeah. Add that to the pile of games I've got to get. No, seriously, you've got to play this game. And then I did. And I was just sort of saying to them, why didn't you make me play this game earlier? What was with that?
Do you remember what playbook you first played?
Yeah, I do. Because I find it really hard to not play the Angel. And I know that I started out playing the Angel.
Nice. Yeah, the Angel was one of my first two. That is really cool. All right, well, let's jump on over here and read a Sitch. Okay, Becky, you and I were chatting beforehand about your style of running one-shot games. And back in the Apillion episode of Plus One Forward, first season, Marissa talked about her methodology. And I said, let's take a look at that and see, is this what you do? And you said, no, not at all. You have a very different approach. So I'm super excited because right there are 1,000 ways to approach GMing. And one-shots are a big part of how people get to know Apocalypse Engine games. So share with us, Becky, what is it that you do when you're going to run a one-shot or a con session?
I think that one of the things that PbtA games really excel at is this fantastic collaborative world building phase, which happens right at the start. And then they often tend to ease you into the play with, maybe we'll just follow the characters around for a day and just see what's happening in their normal life, which is just a really nice kind of soft start. But I think it's a start which is really designed or works best for campaign play. Because when you've got like a 3 to 4 hour session, you don't have that much time. And so when I run PbtA games, and the best PbtA one-shots that I've played in tend to have this kind of idea of a central provocative question that all the characters are invested in. And so for, say, Monster Hearts, that provocative question might be, who's going to get crowned prom queen?
Yeah.
Everybody creates a character who on some level cares about who gets crowned prom queen, or perhaps they care about who shouldn't get crowned. So for Bite Me, the question might be, the alpha of the pack is missing, and which one of you is going to step into that role, and how's that going to end up? But to kind of start with this provocative question, then unlike Marissa, I tend to do a little bit more in the way of pre-genning, because I want everything to be focused on this provocative question. So I'm going to pick the playbooks in Monster Hearts who are most likely to care about who's prom queen. In Bite Me, I'm going to pick the playbooks who are a bit more political, who care more about who's going to be alpha at the end of it, or who are invested in who is in control of the pack. So I'm going to pick the playbooks, and I might even pick the moves of those playbooks, which kind of dig most deeply into that question. Now, how that plays out, what choices the players make, how that story ends, is obviously story first. It's completely open-ended, if you like, but there will be a denouement. There will be an end to the story arc, because the arc of the story is this question that we're going to answer in 3 to 4 hours. And usually if you pick a question which is tight, and you pick the playbooks which hone in on that question, and then you make your relationships at the table, again, point at that question, then you will have this incredibly satisfying one-shot session, which all of the players are deeply invested in, because everybody cares about getting to the answer.
That is really... You know what's funny about that approach is it's not that far off from a lot of prepackaged modules ideas, except that often the box text doesn't happen until after everybody's already made their characters, right? That's when the DM says, oh yes, I love all of your characters and they're all first level. Let me now read to you the box text to tell you why you're here. That you front load, here's what we're going to discuss, here's the provocative question, and letting everybody enmesh that into their character creation is really interesting. How does it work out? Like, do you find that the 3 to 4 hour session is too much time if you've cut out? Because, I mean, honestly, the joke I've heard about PbtA is, hey, PbtA is great. You can pick and just circle these looks and everything, and then you pick a few moves and you can go. But in reality, right, in a con game, you like make your characters and there's no setting, so let's chat for a while. You spend like an hour and a half building the city and talking about their, what they did in third grade, and then all of a sudden the MC will take a break and then they'll construct their thing, and then you get like an hour of actually rolling dice. So what do? You've got 3 to 4 hours, Becky. Did you run? You probably like end early, right? And just send everybody to lunch?
Oh, no, not at all. So, I mean, and this kind of digs in quite deeply to my personal GMing style. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I really cut my teeth on design in freeform LARP. That's where I started designing. That's where I did most of my initial design. I was really privileged to go to a university that wrote a bespoke year-long freeform LARP.
Wow.
Every year. They're still doing it. It's been going for, I think, 25 years now. And that's 25 different games with different GM teams with a bespoke freeform system each time. And what that taught me is that players who come to a game to do interesting stuff with relationships will make their own fun. 4 hours may not be long enough for some of them to resolve the issues that they have crafted between their characters. And really, as an MC, I feel that my job is to facilitate those messy relationships, prod on them when they need prodding on, and this is a really important part of my MCing style, step back and make space for the players to have those conversations.
Do you feel that the provocative question and then tailoring moves, are there any aspects of, say, we'll talk about Bite Me, the game that we'll talk about later, any aspects of the game that you feel like this may not hit the table? Or do you, in your observation with a one-shot, feel like there are certain aspects of PbtA games that maybe we shouldn't be concerned about bringing into play because they're really longer arc, or they're things that won't make it into this one-shot?
I think that you will always create some things that don't get used. And I think that one of the really important things you have to learn as an MC is not to try and cram everything in. If you have a really cool, intense story, full flight, don't break that momentum to try and shoehorn in a bunch of NPCs if everybody seems like they're engaged and they're having fun. So I think there's always some things that need to be left behind, and I think that it's one of the hard things to do, actually, when you're MCing, to say, you know what, I've got this really, really tasty NPC that I really love playing, and they would just be so cool. But you know what? I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to do it because what the players are creating in amongst themselves is already on fire, and I'm only going to interrupt that. Are there aspects of Bite Me that probably wouldn't hit the table? I hope not, actually. I hope that what I have created has got enough of a rhythm in macrocosm and microcosm. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if this is a good place to do it, about how this is different from other Apocalyptic World games. Am I moving into something else here?
Well, maybe we should just go ahead and jump on in to open our brain to Bite Me.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Open your brain. Here we are in Open Your Brain. We are going to open our brains to Bite Me, which is the game that Becky has on Kickstarter right now. Bite Me is this PbtA game that you've got. What is the setting and what is it about, Becky?
So this is a game about the emotional life of being in a werewolf pack. I wanted to write my, if you will, love letter to the 90s kind of vampire games that I played when I was a teenager. I think a lot of us probably played them.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just want to say, met my wife in theater, but we immediately went to. I learned Vampire the Masquerade because I wanted to spend more time with her, and she was interested. So yes, I feel you. Go on, Becky.
So this is my sort of love letter to those games, which I enjoyed immensely when I was 18, 19. But I wanted a game which really honed in on the relationships, on the messy relationships. And so there are kind of two parts to Bite Me. And I think of it as this cycle. I think that if you can kind of track the cycle of the mechanics in a game, that's always good. And so I try and visualize that when I'm designing. So on the one hand of the cycle, you are playing werewolves, and werewolves are superhuman, and they do superhuman things, and sometimes they get a bit out of control, and things are bloody, and they're full of teeth and claws and violence. And so you have that. But on the other hand, when you're talking about werewolf packs, you have this created family of really strong bonds, some positive, some negative. And I think that one of the other things I've always been fascinated with is Jerry Springer shows. And I'll explain that. I'll explain what I mean by that. So what always fascinated me about Jerry Springer style shows was you always had these people come on these shows who had these incredibly abusive or toxic relationships, and you just used to sit there thinking, well, since neither of you are making the other one happy, why don't you just call it a day? Why can't you get out of each other's orbit? What is it that is there some sort of what is it the thing that is gluing you together even when both of you are clearly not happy? And I was kind of very interested by the idea of what is it that glues people together in that way. So that's my explanation. And so I've kind of taken some of that thinking and said, okay, well, so Bite Me is a game about a group of people, some of whom may love each other, some of whom may hate each other, but they, for good or for ill, they are glued together. So what do we do with these two things to make them into one game?
Yeah, this sounds like two pretty disparate things. How did you do it, Becky?
Well, so there's a couple of things. So the first thing is that there are moves in Bite Me for having emotional and vulnerable conversations. So that if you want to say something vulnerable to somebody else, you make a move. When that, to do it, you do it. So you have your vulnerable conversation, then you say, okay, I think I'm making the spill move here, guys. And there are mechanical benefits to that. And one of the mechanical benefits is something called pack pool. It's like a points pool, probably a little bit like Night Witch's mission pool.
Okay.
So it's a pool of points, and you can spend that in two ways. You can spend your pack pool on, if you're working together as a pack, more than one of you, together as a pack, you can spend them 1-for-1 to boost rolls after you've rolled.
Okay.
You can also, if you save them up and you hoard them, you can spend them on pack moves. So there is a character sheet for the pack, and on that character sheet are moves which are really, really powerful endgame moves.
Okay.
We have saved up all of our points, and we are going to decide together as a pack, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to use this pack move, and we're just going to, this horrible threat that's facing us, we're just going to wipe it off the map with these really powerful moves. But they're expensive. And so you can't get them unless you are having these emotional conversations in character with the rest of the player group.
You're saying that the pool that you use to buy the pack moves is how you get help from someone else. Do you ever have players who are like miserly about it because they really want that big pack move?
What normally happens is that if people really want the big pack move, they're the people who are just spilling their emotions over everybody else as much as they possibly can. So it incentivizes those conversations. Now, there's a rhythm here. So there's a cycle that as an MC, if you notice that the players have built up quite a big pool of pack points, that is the time you want to start hitting them with really serious threats. That if they're missing their rolls, you want to start really punishing them and really riding them hard because you want to incentivize them to spend those points. Conversely, if you can see that they're running low on pack pool points as an MC, that's the time to put the brakes on the action a little bit, start prodding those difficult relationships to make them talk to each other or to encourage them to talk to each other, and to just shut up and make space for the conversations to happen. So Pack Pool, it does some really cool stuff for the players, but actually the most important stuff it does is to signal to the MC how to pace the game.
That's nice. I really like that as a marker. It reminds me of when I run Lady Blackbird. I often will, because there are keys, and as a certain character, say Kale Arkham, is going after some of their keys, they will get XP for it. And I use physical poker chips to represent experience points, so that when I'm running it at a live table, I can just scan real quick for the green poker chips. And if I see I've got a stack of 3 or 4 for everybody except for Snargle, that's telling me, hey, I have not been pushing on Snargle to have to deal with Key of Conscience or her Key of Conscience or the Key of Daredevil. There are these things that I know because I understand the characters and I've got that indicator. So I like the idea of this pack pool being an indicator to the GM. It's not just a resource for the players, but it is a trigger for when the MC needs to start hitting hard. That's really, really cool, Becky.
Thank you. I just think that emceeing is a really hard job, and PbtA does an awful lot of work for the MC. One of the things that I think is so beautiful about PbtA systems is the way it takes some of the creative load off the MC and distributes it more evenly around the table, which I think there's so many reasons why that's a good thing. I think it means that there's less pressure on the MC. I think it gives agency to the other players in a way which is really awesome. But I think there is still in PbtA games, I mean, they are, for the most part, MC games. There is still somebody who is responsible for the pacing and that sort of thing. So I think that, you know, when I'm designing any kind of help that I can give to that person to make it really clear when they should be doing certain things.
Yeah, because a lot of the times when an MC is supposed to make a move in many PbtA games is when the players look at you expectantly, and this is a much clearer indicator of like, no, you need to be doing a thing. That's pretty cool. So what other mechanics, that's definitely a mechanic that's different in this game versus Apocalypse World, but are there any other mechanics in Bite Me that you feel are really radically different? Say I'm coming in from Apocalypse World and I jump straight into this because I've heard it's the new hotness.
I hope it's the new hotness. So the other different things are loss of control mechanics, I think. So as I said earlier, this is my love letter to Vampire, and when I first designed this game, there were no real loss of control mechanics in. And after my first couple of playtests, I was talking to some of my playtesters and I was sort of saying, you know, what's really missing is that feeling as a werewolf that, you know, if your control slips, you might go feral, you might do something violent you don't really want to do. And I kept thinking, how am I going to mimic that in this game? Because I think for a long time now in our gaming culture, the idea of GMs taking control of players and taking away that player agency has been very much out of favour, and for all sorts of good reasons. Mm-hmm. For me, for a werewolf game, it felt thematically essential, to be honest. And so there are 2 loss of control mechanics in this game. So firstly, there is a domination mechanic in this game. And the way that domination works is that you have to get a strong hit if you're trying to dominate somebody, to dominate a player into doing something they don't want to do. If you do manage to get your strong hit, then that player will do it.
Okay.
They don't have to like it. They don't have to agree with it. In fact, it's better if they don't. But they have to follow the order that they have been given by somebody who has dominated them into doing it. And what is the advice to people I give, the advice to players that I give in this is that if somebody has made your character, ordered your character to do a thing you don't want to do, or that they don't want, that the character doesn't want to do, then that's amazing. That's brilliant. That is grist for the mill of your relationship. You know, that is something you're going to spill about later on. You're going to use that spill move, having a go at them for making you do that thing you didn't want to do. So it just kind of brings it right back to these things which taking control away from your character are really, as a player, you want to be writing those down, remembering them, and then throwing that back in somebody's face in the middle of a conversation at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's the sort of thing. But because I wrote this game and safety is really important to me, there are things you cannot dominate somebody to do. So
good. I'm so glad to hear you going this way, Becky, because that was the thing in the back of my mind that I was going to ask about safety tools. So yeah, please go on.
So the first thing is that this game starts with a banned list discussion. So I have that in all my games, that before we even start creating background or picking playbooks, we are going to have a conversation, and that might be, if necessarily, through anonymous emails to the GM or the MC if people don't want to say. But anybody should feel free, either in discussion or anonymously, to say, you know what, this is a list of stuff that's off the table for me. I don't want huge amounts of torture in this game. It's a werewolf game, there's some violence, but I don't want gratuitous torture descriptions, or I don't want sexual assault, or, I'm a parent, one of my big squicks is that I can't have any sort of child abuse or abandoned children in games.
I hear you.
So these things are off the table. So the first thing is, if it's on the banned list, you can't dominate somebody to doing it.
Good.
I think that the X card, we've had it, the X card around for a long time. I think it's still a very, very valuable tool, because not everybody knows at the start of a game when something's going to be hurtful. Yesterday it was fine that we had this in a game, but today, you know what? It's not fine for me. I'm not in a good place. And the X card is a really good way of just saying, I just can't deal with this right now. I also recommend using Script Change by Bree Sheldon. If you need a more nuanced discussion, and people are okay to have a more nuanced discussion about how to fast forward through content or rewind or that sort of thing, then Bree's script change tool is a really nice one. But it actually says, regardless of whether you use those tools or not, it says written into the mechanics, you cannot use dominate for rape or sexual assault. That just can't happen, because I'm the designer of this game and I'm just fiating it out. And you can't make somebody commit suicide. Done.
Okay, cool.
So that's dominate. There is another mechanic called give in to the wolf. So you can change into wolf form at any time you like in this game. But give in to the wolf is a move which, if you do it, you get big benefits. Huge mechanical benefits. There's kind of a menu of benefits that you can choose from, and they will turn you from your normal character, who is already pretty powerful, into real sort of superhuman level territory. If you roll a miss, the MC will control your character for the next scene.
Wow. Okay.
And the idea is that it's a temptation. If you don't want to run the risk of losing control of your character, you never have to use that move. But there's gonna come a point when your back is against the wall and the pack really need you to do it. And what are you gonna do? Are you gonna take that risk? And it gives the player complete choice. But the second they say, I'm going to run that risk, well, then you better hope you roll well. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier with the dominate stuff, is that if this happens, and I'm running a campaign at the moment, and the last thing that happened in the campaign was that somebody rolled a 6 when they gave in to the wolf. And so there was a huge fight going on, and I described all of the other actions, and I got to this player who had just rolled a 6, and I said, and we'll leave it there and pick it up again in the next session.
Nice.
Whatever that character ends up doing, and it's a 6, it's going to be a hard move. Whatever they end up doing, they should absolutely be making a note of that, and having their character angst about it, and then using that spill move later on to use that thing that they did to get some pack pull points to kind of keep that cycle turning around. Very
cool. That is brilliant. I have to ask, and I think I maybe know I don't know if my detective skills are telling me I might know the answer to this one, but what is your favorite move in Bite Me?
It's spill.
What is this move I haven't heard of yet?
Never heard of it before. So I basically wrote this game to put the spill move in. And I got the name for the move because at the time I was reading some Terry Pratchett. I know, it's just... I knew I wanted to have this move, and I was reading this Terry Pratchett. It was one of the We Free Men, or his young adult novels, and there's a bit where they talk about somebody's brain just, all of the things in their head just sort of spilling over. And I said, that's it. That's what my move needs to be. It's when your emotions are spilling out of you so much that you can't help but talk about it to the person who's next to you, or on the phone, or whatever. And I wanted that move in there, and I wanted it to be front and centre, because my conception of werewolves is that they are so much closer to those emotions than humans. They don't have the same sort of barriers that maybe we construct as humans. They're much closer to each other. They're less frightened of their emotions and their instincts, because they've got bigger and scarier things to be frightened of, frankly, than being a little bit vulnerable in that way. And so it was really important to me to design a game that not only made space for people to have those emotional conversations in character, but was absolutely kind of welded into the heart of the mechanics to incentivize it. Because I think that to kind of paraphrase or steal something from business, what in our world, what gets mechanized gets done at the table.
True enough. Okay. Becky, you got me pretty excited about Bite Me and spilling all over the place. And so I think we should go Act Under Fire and take a look at Bite Me and kind of work through some of this game, okay?
Okay.
It is time to act under fire.
All right, in Act Under Fire, normally we will have actual play scene, but this is a pack-oriented game, which really functions better with 3 to 5 players? You think that's about the right number? Or what do you recommend for a Bite Me group?
I think that if you're doing it online, the sweet spot is probably 3 to 4. If you're doing it in person, you can probably take up to 5.
Okay. And because of the pack-oriented aspect of Bite Me, and the fact that I'm only so talented as a role player, we're probably going to talk through other aspects of Bite Me to get the good stuff, and kind of so I can get a taste of how this thing plays, and so people can understand a bit more about Bite Me. So what would you like to tackle in Bite Me in our Act Under Fire?
So, right. I think that the first thing that we want to do is to choose our playbooks. And I think the reason we want to do that first is there's some really very different playbooks here, and I think you can really influence the style of game that you're going to have, depending on what you choose, as is the case for, I think, a lot of PbtA games. It all comes down to who you're going to be.
Do we have a provocative question to kick us off?
Do I have a provocative question? Well, my favourite is always, your alpha is missing. Who is going to step up? And are they going to be willing to let go if you find your alpha?
Ooh, that is pregnant with possibility. Especially the second question. I really like that as a nice stinger. That is pretty cool. Let's go with that.
Cool. So, George, you'd like me to kind of run you through the playbooks?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the first playbook, and this was actually the very first playbook that I wrote, is the Enforcer. And this is the character who is willing to cross the line to protect their family. The person who'll do what's necessary to ensure survival, and someone that the alpha will have on a tight leash, and also that the alpha will kind of use as a threat. And really the Enforcer character, it's up to you to decide if your loyalty to the pack and the alpha is such that you embrace your role and you will do dark, dark things to protect them, or whether your loyalty is of the sort of flavour whereby you carry this as a burden, that you will do this for the ones you love, even though it's eating you up inside. And although it's not actually a werewolf, the person who I had in my mind when I created this was Giles from Buffy. And I do hope I'm not going to spoiler anybody for the season 4, I think, with Glory. There's a bit in, I think it's season 4, where Giles kills a human being so that Buffy doesn't have to make the decision. And for me, that epitomised the Enforcer. It's the person who will carry that burden of guilt so that others don't have to.
Oh, I definitely remember that, and that is a heck of a spoiler, but it's been 20 plus years, so that has expired.
I feel I should be pretty safe on that by now.
I think so.
So the next playbook is the Cub. And this is for somebody who wants to play a werewolf of any age, but who has only just been turned. So they're not going to have been a werewolf for more than at most a year, probably more like a few months. So you could play a cub who is 14, you could play a cub who is 85, because what matters is how long you've been turned a wolf. And this is a playbook which is about you're learning the rules of what pack life is, you're creating these relationships with your new pack mates, but you are screwing up. You are screwing up. But it doesn't matter because you're a cub and they love you and they want to protect you. You're that indulged younger sibling who gets away with things that other people wouldn't. So that's the cub. And then there's the prodigal. This is somebody who used to be in the pack and they left. And for some reason or other, they have returned. Why have they come back? Have they come back because they owed somebody a favour? Have they come back because they just couldn't make life work being on their own and they had to say, I'm a failure, I've got to come back to the family? But because you left, you hurt people. Maybe somebody died because you weren't there to do something that you should have done. And finding your place again is going to be really hard. Who is going to embrace you? Who is going to resent you? And who is it that you are avoiding from the minute you come home?
Oh my gosh, have you seen the, I believe it's a Canadian series called Bitten?
I have read all of the books.
Oh, they're based on books? I didn't know that. That is totally what that character's about. That is really cool because I loved that idea of the person who left the pack and is now pulled back in. Really fascinating. That's on Netflix here in America, and I've really enjoyed
I can highly recommend the book series. I think the TV show is good, but I think the books absolutely sing. So if you enjoy the TV series, you should definitely check out the books by Kelly Armstrong.
Awesome. What's next?
The Fixer. This is the person who has 1 foot in the pack and 1 foot in the mortal world. So like the Enforcer has 1 foot in the pack and 1 foot in a world of violence, the Fixer is somebody who has to be in the pack but also outside it, so that they can smooth things over with the police, they can disappear bodies, they can find people who need finding. And the Fixer is a character who loves the pack, but they are just absolutely fascinated with mortals, and it really pulls them apart having to be in between two worlds. Next, and unsurprisingly, is the Alpha. And it took quite a while to get to the Alpha because I don't think the Alpha should be the most important character necessarily in a game. The Alpha is absolutely a playbook. Players can play the Alpha and they are encouraged to do so, because pack is nothing without its Alpha, and the Alpha is nothing without a pack. And the reason the Alpha is so important, and I want to encourage players to play it, is that the whole shape and feel of the pack is very much going to reflect who the Alpha is and what their style is. Are they someone who rules with fear, viciously punishing the disobedient? Are they respected and loved? Is it a lot more complicated than that? Are people going to run into danger and die for you? Are they going to depose you? How does the pack reflect the inner self of the Alpha?
So you're saying the pack, how does the pack reflect the Alpha? So the other PCs, as they're being created, will probably influence how the Alpha would then be created as well. Is that what you're saying?
I think that when you do character creation in Bite Me, you want a lot of back and forth. So you want to be saying, okay, well, I want my character to be like this, but maybe they're subsuming this part of themselves to fit into the pack. Or maybe the Alpha is governing in a particular way because the Alpha knows they've got some really hot-headed wolves under them who need a lot more discipline. And the other thing is, I mentioned earlier, there's a pack playbook. So there's a playbook for each character, which is the wolf you will play, and there's a playbook for the pack, which is really about the personality of the pack. What is your culture? What are your traditions? What are your rules? And we'll get onto that in a little bit.
Okay.
So next is the Howl, and this is a sort of a spiritual leader, because I wanted to have a couple of playbooks in here who also had sort of leadership roles within the pack. This isn't just the Alpha's playground. The Alpha has got other characters who have influence over the wolves that they need to work out how to live with in some way or other. And the Howl is one of those. The Howl is the spiritual heart of the pack. They might be the Alpha's best friend and ally. They might be biding their time to get rid of the Alpha and take over, or maybe they're doing both.
Okay, cool.
And lastly is the Grey Pelt, who's the oldest and the wisest of all of the wolves, but for some reason or other, they're not the Alpha. Why are they not the Alpha? They are the characters going to remember all of the earliest days of the pack and all the battles and the rivalries of the past and the whole history of the pack, as sort of a lore keeper, if you like. And if I was going to sort of sum up what this playbook does, is that when the MC is asking questions, what was the name of that rival pack that happened? The Grey Pelt is a character who has a lot of power, creative power, to set up a lot of that history. They're going to be answering a lot of those questions, and they've got moves around creating history and making things happen, and setting that up.
That is fascinating. I really like that. It's nice as an MC to know who you can go to. And if you have a person who chooses a Grey Pelt, it's immediately an indicator this is the person who wants to talk about the history of the pack. So that's a really cool and clever playbook.
Thank you.
Nice.
So I think the best thing to do is to move on to the pack playbook. Or unless you... the question is, what 4 playbooks do you think our game should have in it?
Well, we don't have an Alpha.
No, we don't.
I think it would be cool if we had an Enforcer, a Cub, a Prodigal, and a Grey Pelt.
Oh, excellent. Excellent choices, all of those. So if we move on to the pack playbook now, I don't know if you've got it in front of you, but you'll be able to see that there's a section on creating pack culture.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section on creating pack traditions. And this is how you reflect the nature of your pack. But this is also where you cement the culture of your gaming group. So what you're trying to do here is that you're trying to create aspects of culture which you're going to pull out of the game into your out-of-character gaming group and then feed it back in. Because one of the things that I think is most striking about our hobby is that far from being this socially isolated, nerds in basement, people who don't have social skills, kind of moniker that we have got, or this narrative that has developed about who role players are, actually, it's an intensely social hobby. I think it's more social than any other hobby. Can you imagine any other hobby where 4 strangers sit down at a table and have a conversation for 5 hours?
Only if it were about specific players of a sports team, or which sports team sucks more than another.
Exactly. And I've sat there, and it reminds me a little bit of going on workshops at work. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So if you're going on like a 2 or 3 day workshop at work, you're suddenly in a room for 8 hours with these total strangers. But for those 8 hours, you're doing all of these exercises together, you're probably eating together, and it's almost like you create this little kind of time bubble around yourselves, that for this kind of moment in this space, we're this group suddenly. And that obviously happens at the gaming table. What creating playbook, the pack playbook is designed to do is to take those feelings of we're all sitting at this game table in this little bubble, we are this little group right now, and say, those feelings you're feeling right now, well, that's pack. We're going to intensify that, and we're going to use that in our role playing. So if listeners are familiar with the term bleed, which comes from Nordic LARP, but it is very much that sense of taking feelings you're feeling, putting it into your role-playing, taking feelings from your role-playing, putting it into yourself, which is why safety mechanics are so important in this game.
Absolutely.
So, I would say part of pack culture, the first thing you do with pack culture is you create slang. All groups, all cultural groups have in-jokes and phrases, and and we have it ourselves in the PbtA community. PbtA, MC, you do it, rules as written, all of these little kind of buzzwords, you know when you hear somebody using those phrases that they're kind of part of your pack, if you know what I mean. So the first thing you do in culture is you create a number of slang phrases that you will use at the table, in character and out of character, and the MC is very much encouraged to use those phrases again and again and again and again to kind of be the person who sets that cultural tone. And of course the words you choose for your slang very much inform how the culture of your pack. So are humans, are they muggles, which is kind of like a bumbling, gentle, but ultimately not very nice phrase, or are they prey? In what words you choose to talk about humans, to talk about wolves who don't have a pack, to talk about cubs, to talk about how you change, your first hunt, these sorts of terms. So does anything kind of spring to mind with the playbooks that you've picked about what sort of slang you think you might like to...
I'm fascinated with the idea of the cub and some kind of slang around cubs, maybe something to do with like cutting your teeth or wet behind the ears, something that you can easily work into a regular conversation, but is a very strong indicator of the gray pelt keeping the cub in their place, or corralling them, leashing them to where they need to do the right thing.
Oh, I love that. And you've chosen a prodigal, and I love the idea of people using it on the prodigal as an insult to say, well,
yeah,
you've been away, you're just like a cub now, so I'm just going to talk to you as if you're a cub.
So mean.
And it's the enforcer, right? He's going to be the one who's talking all the trash.
Oh, totally. So, so for slang, let's just go with wet behind the ears. I think that's brilliant. I might steal that and put it on a list of suggested slang so that people don't have to think.
Go for it. That sounds great.
Thank you. And the other thing, apart from your shared slang, is that you're going to choose cultural expressions. So is there a particular way that you eat together? Is there any kind of taboos, things you don't talk about?
I've always found it interesting, I'm not sure what the common phrase is, but there's there's a place called Buca di Beppo. It's an Italian restaurant chain here in America where it's served family style. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a big dish that everyone partakes from. They all take from the large dish that's in the center of several dishes, and there's a sharing and passing the food around kind of thing. I think that would be a really fascinating way of restoring or reinforcing the communal aspect of the pack.
No, that sounds great. That sounds absolutely brilliant. No, perfect. Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is traditions. And normally I say that you want to go for 3 pack traditions, and these are rules. But they are rules, and they are laws, and they are the things that if you break them, you are going to be punished. And the kind of mechanically what they do in the game is a couple of things. They provide a real tension point. So you want to pick things which are going to kind of be provocative or be difficult to comply with, or you want to be able to give the MC an opening to at any point. I need to give you a hard choice. My hard choice is going to be, you're going to let a packmate die, or you're going to break a tradition. That's the sort of thing. But also it means that if you've got a PC alpha, well, how are they going to enforce that? How are you going to make are they going to enforce it? And if they don't enforce it as an MC, what are you going to do to punish them for not enforcing it? Are you going to have a rebellion? What are you going to do? So you want to pick something which is, this is like the masquerade and vampire, that sort of thing. Have you got any ideas for kind of rules that must not be broken?
Yeah, I think in the modern age, a tradition would be smart of leave no evidence behind, no photographic evidence of you as a werewolf.
Definitely.
And that's an easy move for an MC to threaten someone with.
And the way that I like to get the MC leading off on that is to say which player has already broken that rule and who is keeping their secret.
Nice. Oh man. So in this situation, I think the player who's broken that rule is the prodigal.
And the cub is keeping the secret.
Oh, fantastic. So we've already got a really nice, neat little relationship there. And I think that's probably a good time to turn to the relationships questions, because this is PbtA game. There's a section on relationships. And now that we've got an idea about what the pack is like and who's involved in it, I think we can kind of start to build up those relationships. And the relationships, there's a lot of guidance in the Bite Me document for the MC on how to use those relationships. But
Good.
basically, I talked earlier about that cycle between the violence and the emotions. One of the things that the tools that the MC has to drive that cycle is that they're going to take the traditions and these difficult relationships and use them like wedges to force cracks in the pack. And when it looks like everything is about to explode and be irrevocably split apart, then the MC should be slamming them really hard with external threats to bring that pack back together. So these relationship questions are the wedges that the MC is going to use to drive that cycle. Okay, so the Enforcer. What is the most shameful thing you ever did to protect the pack, and which packmate knows about it?
Question that's been bouncing around in my brain as we've talked. It sounds like in this world of Bite Me, werewolves aren't born, they're bitten. Is that right?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I have not defined an awful lot about that, because I want the players in their world building phase to decide that for themselves. I didn't want this game to become too heavy with lore that you needed to know up front. So you can be bitten, you could be bitten a wolf, you can be born a wolf. It kind of you could be both. You can have both types in the game, and it's really up to the player group.
I think that the Enforcer has a kid that he's lost through divorce proceedings, and he's kind of keeping it hidden because we don't know if that kid's going to turn.
Oh no, and if that kid does turn, they should have been part of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, that's brilliant. I love it. And who knows about it?
I think the Grey Pelt knows.
Ah, see then.
If they're lore master, they know everything.
Now I want to know why the Grey Pelt is keeping that secret. But we're gonna keep it feral, and that'll come out in play. So the cub. The cub's question is, which packmate do you hero worship, and what could they do to break that trust?
I think that the cub hero worships the Enforcer because they were raised on the idea of werewolves being strong, and the Enforcer is the most obviously strong of the group.
What is it the Enforcer could do to shatter that hero worship and break that trust?
I think that the cub comes from a broken home.
And
Oh!
If the cub knew that the Enforcer had effectively abandoned their kid, or that's how the cub would see it, it would tear them apart.
Excellent. So, the prodigal. Which packmate did it hurt you the prodigal, the most to leave behind? And how do they feel about the fact you've returned?
I think it hurt the prodigal the most to the person that they least wanted to leave is the Grey Pelt. Yeah. And was the second half of the question? Sorry.
How does the Grey Pelt feel about that? About the fact you've returned?
Oh, the Grey Pelt feels that the prodigal is a necessary tool. I don't think it
was.
It was an asynchronous relationship.
I love it. And that's brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. That's perfect. That for there's a prodigal player out there who will love grinding their emotions up against that. And I hope they're listening to this podcast.
Me too.
So the Grey Pelt, last question. So the Grey Pelt, you have lived for many years and you have done many things over your long life and you have made many enemies. Which packmate did you betray and how?
I think the Alpha.
Oh, yes.
And how? I think that there is an enemy pack that's trying to encroach in the territory, and the Grey Pelt saw the end of their pack and has betrayed the Alpha to this enemy pack. didn't think it would go this far, but now the alpha's missing.
Oh no! Oh, brilliant. So one of the next most important questions is, what are the external threats? You know, we've spent a bit of time kind of teasing out what some of those wedges and difficult relationships is going to be, and I can see that prodigal grey pearl relationship is going to come crashing to some fabulously messy confrontation at some point. But what external threats do we think are facing this pack?
I like the idea of, again, modern age, that the hunting grounds where they can travel are getting smaller and smaller, and so there's an encroachment of civilization, and then there's this other pack that's also been edged into their area, and so now they're both two packs of wild dogs that are fighting over what it was basically a really, really small national forest, maybe.
I really love that. Along with the theme of encroaching, something that's come up in a couple of games that I've run has been people have wanted fracking to be a threat to the pack. In the UK, we've got fracking is just becoming is starting to become a thing in the UK. It's not as established as it is in the US.
Oh, well, I'm just going to hipster you. Yeah, we've been doing fracking for a while back here.
I know. But we passed a law that said if there is a gas reserve under your house, then somebody can frack it without your permission.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
In national parks, everything. And so that's come up in a lot of British games because there's kind of a feeling of you're a werewolf pack in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly this fracking company just turns up on your doorstep with their drills and they're like, hello.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
And then a load of environmentalists turn up and camp out on your doorstep and start chaining themselves to railings, and you're like, I don't want any of you here. Go away.
Wow. That's really cool.
But yeah, I love the kind of the encroaching on natural habitats like is happening to real wolf packs, and also the rival thing. So I'm just going to end. I think we've created a lot of really cool stuff here. And the last question that I ask as MC, or I suggest MC asks, is who is the weakest packmate? Who would be the easiest to pick off?
I think it's the grey pelt, and they know it.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the cup. The grey pelt's...
Ah! No. The grey pelt is pretty pragmatic, has betrayed the alpha, knows the prodigal is a tool, and I think they are pretty weak, physically weak, very, very old.
No, I think that's brilliant. So we've got our pack of the cub, the prodigal, the enforcer, and the grey pelt. We've got a whole kind of slew of messy relationships for the MC to start working into something. We've got a small natural habitat that's getting smaller. We've got a rival pack who's just taken your alpha. We know who the weakest is, and then the game's going to start.
That is really, really fun. Becky, thank you so much for coming on here, for sharing with us about Bite Me. Is there any last information about Bite Me that you wanted to share?
I just want people to spend 3 or 4 hours feeling like they're in the pack with the people around the table with them, even for just that small amount of time.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Becky. And Black Armada Games will have this up.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rachel Shelkey.
Thank you so much.
You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hi listeners, I want to tell you about the Gauntlet Patreon.
The Gauntlet is one of the most active, vibrant communities in tabletop role-playing games. We produce podcasts, the Codex Zine, Gauntlet Hangouts, Gauntlet Con, and more. If you love small press, independent tabletop role-playing games, the Gauntlet is for you. And you can help keep things going by pledging to our Patreon. This year we have 4 different pledge levels for you to join at, each of which comes with a number of benefits. At the $2 level, you get early access to our actual play podcasts, including pocket-sized play, as well as a special Keeper of the Gauntlet title. At the $5 level, you also get a PDF of our monthly zine, Codex. Your name and Keeper of the Gauntlet title is listed in the back of each issue of Codex while your pledge is active. At the $6 level, you also get access to the Gauntlet Slack group, which is the heart of our community. And at the $8 level, you get early RSVP access to new game events on Gauntlet Hangouts. The $8 spots are limited based off how many early access players we think the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar can support. Every month on the 15th, we will make a small number of new $8 spots available. So if you want to play games with the Gauntlet, make sure you keep an eye on our Patreon page around that time so you can grab one of those rare spots. Finally, every member of the Gauntlet Patreon, no matter the level they pledge at, gets to attend Gauntlet Con each year for free. Gauntlet Con is our incredible online gaming convention, with over 200 game events and panels, competitions and prizes, and our bumpin' Gauntlet Con Discord server. Folks, we can't do all this awesome stuff without you, so go check out our page and please consider pledging. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.